Today we're talking about web development tools that as a web developer you should know.
There's a lot more in the workplace that you need to know when you come in.
Try and learn something and then you go on the project to use that technology. That technology has not been used appropriately, so you don't get the opportunity to apply doing it right.
Google Analytics,
MailChimp,
MailChimp,
SEO, accessibility, and different languages like Python. We're going to get into it. So I know we've got a long list here, various things from Google Analytics through to IDEs, through to project management, design tools, plus all your tech languages. There's an entire stack. There's so many things to know.
Yes.
And,
yeah, I think it really comes down to that even though you are a web developer, and a lot of people focus on, okay, you need to understand the standard HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then if you specialize in some certain CMS that I still specialize in, I don't know if you do anymore. You don't want to be called a Drupal developer these days. But, there is a lot more in the workplace that you need to know when you come in. I know when it comes to me, Drupal's a tiny part of the whole package that I, as Ivan, deliver when I work full time. And so, yeah, I'm pretty keen to go through these, but just some random ones that can get listeners, juices flowing. Things like Google Analytics. That is a huge one that a lot of the time, the marketing department come to us developers asking us information about it. Like, we want to track event clicks and this and that. How do we do that? It's like, I don't know. But then you kind of learn that over time. And another thing that just came to me, didn't even write it down. And that is integrating with email marketing services. A lot of the times, MailChimp,
ActiveCampaign,
what is it? Constant Contact. 9 times out of 10, when I create when I'm building a new Drupal site, there is always a ticket about integrating one of these things into Drupal somehow. And you just need to know these things that aren't really that you specialize in, but you just need to know. I think you just learn that just by being in industry, just using things. But it's not Drupal specific. I wouldn't call myself a marketing expert by any chance. Well, I am trying to do that with content creation and things like that. But yeah.
When you speak to that, because I'm just straight away going SEO, accessibility, there's things we didn't list down, but that was our plan today because I expected, I think you kind of did too, that as we talk, we'd uncover all sorts of things that perhaps we don't know. Now I seem to think, talk about SEO, for example. I learned the basics of SEO 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm guessing around 20 years ago. When did Google come out? Like when Google first came out. And I think the fundamental basics haven't changed about getting your keywords right, putting keywords in your content. It's quality of content that matters, not necessarily farming keywords, that kind of thing. You pick it up, and we've spoken to this so many times that the fundamentals and the fundamentals don't change. But it's interesting how much I feel like there's so many things I don't know that maybe I should know, like when it gets into DevOps and different languages like Python, right? Python's been a word that I hear at least once a week for years and years and years. Yeah. And I wrote a Python script to make my phone on my desk dial. It could look up there was a CSV in our network somewhere with all the internal contacts. So it could suck that CSV dial by, it had searched through like the username or the username, whatever I typed in there on my command line, and make my phone dial and just dial for me, which I did just to learn Python. And then I wrote that script. It's like, now do I know Python? Because I wrote one script. And all having to learn the development environment around that, the ecosystem around that. It's at what point do you say you know something? The awareness, we've got things in here. I'm jumping around all over the place, but that's kind of the point, I think, is things like CSS and Sass and modern CSS box models. We've got TypeScript and Kubernetes. Bash, I'd say I know pretty well, but I Google it all the time. which is a point to make is, at what point do you know it when you're just Googling it all the time? Like knowing how to Google it, I think, is knowing it. So that's part of what this conversation is about. And there's so many that stem from this, because you talk about MailChimp. I've integrated with MailChimp before. I've written a module in Drupal, or I submitted patches to the MailChimp module in Drupal. I feel like, but if you ask me, do I know MailChimp now? It's like, well, that was a while ago.
Yeah.
And that's when people, that's the funny thing when they ask you, have you ever integrated MailChimp? Do you know how to do that? Do you know their API? And it's like, well, I've integrated all sorts of APIs.
Yeah.
An API is an API, and I've had that challenge too. It's like, but it begs the question: at what point, what should you know? Because Google Analytics is probably the first one you brought up, and that's which sparked the idea for this channel. Because I was speaking to a friend of mine who's not a tech person; they're in marketing. They're managing a WordPress website, and they said to me, "Hey, do you know anything about Google Analytics?" I'm like, "No." But I've installed the Drupal Google Analytics module and the Google Tag Manager module, and I've had to got an ID and plug it in there, and I kind of know what it does, and was able to sort of have that conversation on a level of, and she goes, well, you do know Google Analytics. It's like, I've never logged into it, right, ever. And then happened to speak to another friend the very next day who happened to mention they're getting a new job and I can bring my Google Analytics skills. And it's like, wait, you know Google Analytics? It's like, I don't know that. So it's funny because you're talking about how we pick these things up. You pick them up. MailChimp, I've picked up. SAS, I've picked up. Basic CSS. TypeScript, not so much. I'm kind of aware what it is. And over the time, you pick up these skills, but you don't necessarily know it. I've never done a course on CSS or SAS or MailChimp, or yet I've worked on them. And we've spoken to this before. I think both of us, it happens to me a little bit more. I tend to pick up the skills that I need to solve the problem in front of me, and that's where it stops.
Yes. Yes.
So you end up with a very broad range of basic, vague understanding of everything. And I know in the work life, especially when it comes to things like estimating, that's when it can get a challenge. Of course, you're like, I just don't get the details. I kind of know generally what's involved, but I have no idea what pitfalls we're going. All I know is we're going to run into pitfalls. I don't know which ones.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, a good example of like learning just enough to get by, that was React. So I learned it originally because I joined a team in 2016 that had a big application form in React. But this was just when I think ES6 became the popular way of writing components. Then you use, Redux as a state management.
I dabbled in React a little bit last year.
Then a couple years later, things changed. You moved over to stateless functions. Then it was all the hooks. Everything moved over to hooks. Then it was like, okay, well, TypeScript is now often is the default way of writing things. So every single time I've then come into a new team, it's like, oh, okay, it's been written again differently. Okay, I need to kind of get my head around this stuff again. I need to get my head around it. It's kind of like every single time I pick up a new tool for a project, I kind of learn it. Like my skill set is forever locked in the state of that project.
Yes. So you're talking some of the JavaScript stuff. I think that's where it comes in a lot, because I learned JavaScript when JavaScript came out, right? I was programming in IE3 when you had I believe it was still in IE3. You had a choice of VB script or JavaScript.
Oh, yeah.
You just changed the tag and it did compile either and run either. And then JavaScript became standard and they used that. So I was writing in JavaScript. This is like 2000, right? I remember the Olympics was here in Sydney.
Oh, yes.
So, and then, and now you talk about things like ES6 and TypeScript and things like that. And it's like, as far as I'm aware, it's just like, I don't know when these things changed, and I'm still writing the same code and it still compiles. And it's like, I don't know what ES6 is. And I wonder if that's an advantage that some young people have, because they come in not having to unlearn things a little bit because they learn JavaScript. I'm like, how the hell do you learn JavaScript? Like it's just, and then even JavaScript, I never quite understood. Like if you ask me, how do you create an object in JavaScript? I'd be like, I don't know, but I'm sure I've written them and called them and fixed them and fixed bugs in JavaScript a million times. But you ask me questions like that, and I'm like, I don't think I'd pass an exam. Yeah, I can fix your bug. It's very, it's a very interesting case, and that's where you get the same with you talking CSS. When over time, took me a long time to learn CSS. Felt like I didn't know CSS until jQuery came out, and then when I used jQuery, it was in the jQuery documentation that it explained how selectors work, and that finally clicked. Because you needed to use selectors in jQuery all the time, right? Use CSS selectors. And then it all just, it's one of those, you don't know what you're missing. Yeah. Right? It's just this CSS is some enigma. I don't get it. I was writing HTML back in the day where you had color and font tags and tables, and then CSS took over. And I remember studying into that, and it's trying to learn it because you start learning CSS and you're reading 2 chapters on cascading and what cascading means. And now when you talk CSS, whoever really mentions cascading, it's not really something you talk about because you just do your selectors and you just know that the more precise selector wins. That's basically what cascading means, right?
Or the concept, if you're using a utility-based framework like Tailwind, that you don't even have to worry about that.
Well, there's Tailwind something that I feel like I should know that I don't, because Bootstrap's been around forever. The few times I've used Bootstrap, somebody else has set up the theme, and then they throw you there, here's this theme in Bootstrap, Bevan, make this box do such and such. So you learn enough Bootstrap to get that box to do its thing. It's like, and also whoever used Bootstrap probably wasn't the right tool. They haven't used Bootstrap properly. So you're learning Bootstrap through the example of how Bootstrap shouldn't be used, and you've never seen how it should be. So I've found that as a struggle a lot in my learning is I'll go, you know what, I want to understand Bootstrap. I'll go and read all the documentation. Okay, I understand Bootstrap. Of course, you wanted me for this Bootstrap project. I'll jump on it and go, why is everything done nothing like what was said in the manual? Like it's, so then you don't get a chance to apply those. Well, I don't. I've found that a few times. You go and try and learn something, and then you go on the project to use that technology. That technology has not been used appropriately. So you don't get the opportunity to apply doing it right. And it's perpetually, and it's, I guess that's one of my skills, or it's something I seem to fall into, is just always being in the situation of problem solving. It's that kind of problem solving a lot of the times, just learning enough to know to get this thing to work, and it's hack it in there. And I'm very passionate about doing quality work and doing things properly. Always finding myself on projects where it's already too late, right? It's already been done wrong. And so that's this idea of what should you know that you don't, because we've got Git on here. Git's outside that example of, I mean, there are approaches to using Git like Git flow, certain ways to approach using Git, whether you should merge or rebase. Took me a long time to really understand the difference between rebase.
I still don't know fully the difference between them.
I know I'm about to say I've explained it before, and I could probably explain it now, and I still don't get it. Because here's the thing, right? It's a deck of cards. You know when you got a deck of cards and you shuffle them, right? And there's one where you just kind of interlace them one after in chronological order. You just bring the cards together, and there's the other one where you just pick the next batch of cards up and just stick them on top. It's basically that. You either cut the cards and then put the next stack on top, or you shuffle both and integrate them together. Something like that. But then again, I've never been on a team where it's been properly said, this is how we do it and this is why we do it, and we're going to follow it this way. I seem to find myself on teams where, should we try rebasing? Oh, maybe we should merge. And then you rebase and someone else merges and it all breaks. And then you just, that's how you deal with it. You just put up with the merge conflicts all the time. That's not always been like that. I've worked on a few teams where it's clean, but there's, when it's hard to, sometimes teams are a bit like herding cats.
Well, yeah. Well, I've worked on teams where they were like, we don't want to see a merge commit. I'm like, okay, but why? It's the history, just pollutes the history. Who honestly sits through the history of Git? And like, it's messy to begin with. Like, you're not going to it's not going to be a nice narrative that you can read through and things like that. Like, I do understand it, but
I've heard that too. And
the thing is, if you can stick to and just coming off this whole Git thing, if you're going to use either GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket, there you go. There's a blast from the past. I didn't even know.
Still around, isn't it?
Still around. If you stick to those and create whatever merge request, pull request, whatever they're called in their own, because GitLab calls it something different. Just stick to that standard. But I know from experience, the first thing I ask is, what is your your pull request workflow? Do I need to create a branch, or do you have one? And then sometimes when I join a new team, I will get in there. I don't see any consistencies, and I create a branch, and they're like, "Oh, can you create a branch with this?" with like feature / blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, is this documented anywhere? Oh, no. We just like it that way. It's like, well, okay. Would be good if you guys can tell me and document it. But then, if you can use that. But it also comes down to knowing these tools as well. That's another thing where it's like, you have to know GitHub. You have to know GitLab. I believe those ones.
But what is there to know about? See, that's the funny thing. No GitHub, right?
You need to know your way around GitHub. You need to have an account. Some people don't have accounts. Some people have never used it. You need to know how to just.
It's like, do you know how to use Facebook? Like, there's no course on how to learn Facebook. You open up Facebook and you use Facebook, right? It's kind of, if you don't know how to open up Facebook, that's not because you don't know how to use Facebook. It's because you don't know how to use technology. And I find GitHub's a bit the same. Like, it's kind of, I guess you got to have a foundational understanding of what Git is, which I knew because I learned that before GitHub was around. But I mean, you log in there and it's got create account, and you see the big green button that says create repository, and you go, well, that must be how I create a repository. Right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. But then also there's the level of knowing, because there's GitHub actions. Do you know how to write a GitHub action and set all those up? Do you need to know that to say that I know GitHub? Do I need to know them at all? Because I've written a GitHub action before, a basic one. I know it's a little YAML file that kicks off CI stuff in there, but still I wouldn't turn around and say I know GitHub actions, because again, you want me to do something, first thing I'm going into Google and reading up how do GitHub actions work all over again. That's part of what the tricky question is around things I don't know that I probably should. And it's very hard to define that. Yeah. But to define what do I know? I think I've said it before. One of my skill sets is not knowing stuff. It's being able to figure stuff out as I need it.
Yes.
So, that's in my content creation at the moment, learning how to edit and produce videos and stuff. I'm figuring it out as I go.
Yep.
Done. Made a video. It's pretty good.
There you go.
Honestly, I'm making a video at the moment. The theme is I don't know what I'm doing. It's the whole video is about not knowing what you're doing and doing it anyway. We spoke about that in our previous episode on Cult of Done Manifesto.
Yeah.
Just on the side, because it's on my mind. I'm in the middle of doing it at the moment, but that's what do we need to know? And there's so many things because what's that phrase? Full stack developer. I tend to get a bit trolling on the internet when you see people talking, I'm a full stack developer. And I'm just like, yeah, what does that mean?
Exactly. That's pretty much any type of developer that doesn't, I don't know.
Like if you know Bash, that's like full stack. And I'm kind of, it's which stack? Every single stack's a different stack.
Yeah, exactly. And I jokingly say with my team that I'm working with now, whenever I fix up front end like bugs in Next.js, I go to them and say, "Oh, look at me, I'm full stack now. I'm full stack. No, I am full stack, or like I'm full stack." There you go. I jokingly say that because it is
fully stack.
Fully stacked. It is a running joke. Like, what is full stack? That's essentially a way for a company to have to find people that can do everything, and they want a developer, DevOps, and this comes down to the DevOps stuff. That's something
where DevOps is. It's a developer doing operations. That's what the name means.
That's where I kind of struggle now at this point, where I feel like everyone else seems to just get it, and they are experts in it, and they can spin up and create a full architected system that has three redundancies and multi-cloud platform on Kubernetes and stuff like that. See, I know enough to spin out words, but I don't know enough to actually spin up sites. There you go. And I would love to have that time to spend to learn that stuff.
But is there anybody who really? I don't think there is anybody who really knows that whole. Like, because I'm on a project, I'm sitting there, spent the last. Yeah, but you specialize in it, right? So then, that guy that's writing Ansible to build the deployment, do the CI, and kick all the tests off, isn't the same guy that's writing all the Cypress tests. He's just integrating Cypress.
Well, exactly.
Right, and then it's that T-shaped thing they talk about in Agile. That T's where you've got your main skill and you've got a little bit of the other ones. And is that what a full stack developer is? But then you've got you must have different kinds, because you've got full stack testers, full stack developers, full stack DevOps, which is still argued the whole point of DevOps is that it's devs doing ops. That's how it started anyway. I think these things change and these names pick themselves up over time. I've spoken to that before, that the namings of things change. I think full stack developer probably had a specific name. DevOps did when it started. We talked about it in testing last week. Had a great conversation following that platform with TDD and the nuanced different way people understood test-driven development.
Yeah.
Some people, as long as you write your test before you write your code, then it's test-driven development. And I'm like, if you're writing a Cypress test before you write the code, who does that? No one does that. It implies a unit test to me, doesn't it? I think, but then it's hard to communicate because people have different ideas about what these things mean.
Yes, absolutely.
How are we going for time today? Good. I want to stick to Cloudflare and CloudFront and lay myself on the line that to make it clear how much I know about Cloudflare and CloudFront. I understand, I don't know which one's which, and I don't know the difference between the two. I know one of them's basically a web firewall, right? Which kind of a WAF. That's what the web access firewall.
That's what Cloudflare is. Essentially, CloudFront is a CDN. It's like a reverse proxy. So you would use CloudFront to cache your Drupal sites, and then if there's problems,
it's like Varnish.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's Varnish as a service.
No. Not Varnish as a service, but you can use it as a CDN. Cloudflare can be used as that because you generally proxy your traffic through Cloudflare, and it kind of stops bots from hitting your site. And if you are on a higher plan, well, no, even the free plan will cache assets such as CSS, JavaScript, and images, but it won't cache the actual HTML response of a Drupal site unless you're on a higher plan, like $200 plan or something like that. Whereas CloudFront, CloudFront is often set up in a way where Drupal's not even bootstrapped. Or what I mean by that, for people who don't know, I'm not referring to Bootstrap as the theme. I'm referring to Drupal isn't even loaded up if a user goes to the site, because CloudFront caches the response and then serves that. So it's a good way to scale Drupal. But I do know I spend once or twice a week dealing with caching issues.
Yes.
And 9 times out of 10, it's like, all right, yep, CloudFront for some reason is
So how does that
caching.
interact with, because we've got under DevOps stuff where we've got the cloud stuff, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. I mean, because they've got, I don't see this, that's where it does really show these are where I start to go. I think I should know these things, but I don't know how Cloudflare and CloudFront, I learned a bit from you just now, but how does that integrate with AWS? Because and Varnish, because they've got WAFs built into.
Yeah.
What are they for? Why do you use one? Why do you need one? I mean, and funny enough, I talk about Varnish. I don't think I've ever installed Varnish, configured Varnish.
Yeah, same here.
Set up Varnish. I've worked on a million projects that, or I exaggerate, not a million, only 500,000 of things with Varnish. I know what Varnish is. Basically, it's a cache front end that.
It's a reverse
I sat here, literally had a conversation with you, and you talk about CloudFront. I go, oh, it's like Varnish, and then realized I couldn't exactly tell you what Varnish is either. Yet I was able to make that connection. So interesting.
Well, yeah. Well, CloudFront is a service of AWS. So that's the first thing.
Right.
It is a service of AWS, and it is a CDN predominantly, but you can put in WAF rules as well, I believe. Yeah. So they are very similar, but Cloudflare is its own separate company. And the other good thing about Cloudflare is that they do have a pretty generous free plan for now, but who knows? We're going to eventually get an email saying how, we have invested so much money, blah, 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 and we're increasing prices by $200 a month.
This shows my still trying to get to understand things I don't know that I think I should. Someone who understands what these things are and when to use them, those technologies. I'm a developer. Yeah. Imagine someone who understands how to put those together is more of what you'd call a systems architect.
Yes.
Yeah. So where does that end? Because I feel like I'm supposed to know that stuff as a developer. Yeah. Because the amount of times you're sitting in a room and it's talked about all the time.
Yeah.
But that's another. This goes back to I've been doing Drupal for 13 years. I was web developing long before that, working on major projects, millions of dollars of projects, major enterprise systems where I'm integrating things like MailChimp, for example, but even way more complex APIs than that, internal integrated systems. And then someone comes to me in the pub and goes, what do? You go, web developer. Oh, can you build me a website? It's like, I'd have no idea how to build, like I just can't go to Squarespace. I've never used Squarespace. How do you use Squarespace? I've registered a name. Funny enough, all these years, I'd never registered a domain until recently. I'd never set up my own website. Of course, I've never particularly needed to, and that's every project I've done. That was all taken care of, right? Somebody else did that. Same thing. AWS was configured. It was built. The CI, the CD was configured. It was built. Someone put in CloudFront and Cloudflare. The only time I ever needed to worry about it was when it would cause me a bug that made my new feature not deploy or not show up. And then and then once again, you learn just enough to solve your problem and then get back to work again. And
so what? You only bought a domain recently?
Yeah, I'd never done it before.
Whoa!
Even though I'd studied DNS, I read back in the day. I read the entire TCP/IP manual from start to finish, and the DNS and bind book. Is that the one with the bug on it?
Oh yeah, bind.
The TCP/IP is the camel book. The bind one's got a dragonfly. And I'd played with DNS on my Linux box and set up a local DNS network, but I'd never set up an actual proper domain out in the world. But it's funny, those simple things though, like when someone comes and goes, hey, I need a website, you go use Wix. And it's like, don't ask me to do it because I've not used Wix before. I don't like that. Same thing. I've got a general idea what it is, but I've explained that before it's for an analogy for non-tech people. Imagine, and I'm not a car person, so I'm going to fall the analogy down, but imagine I'm a specialist for F1 carburetors, and it's like, I'm a mechanic. And I go, can you fix my Datsun 180B? And you're like, I'm not going to know. I've got no idea.
But you would probably know.
I could probably figure it out. Yeah, but you're better off going to the guy down the road. Right? Because he's just going to do it with his eyes closed. Whereas I'm here going, where's the I work on carburetors on F1 vehicles. Like it's a different, and that's what I feel the Drupal specialist gets a bit like that sometimes. It's like, I know Drupal, there's people that know Drupal better than I do, but Drupal's my language.
Yeah.
It's my domain. That's the way to put it. And
Yes. Absolutely.
So how have we gone here?
We can smash through some other ones. So things like IDEs, text editors, things like that.
Oh yeah.
Now,
Vim,
yeah.
FTW.
I do think that there are certain skills that you learn just by using them. So it's good to learn the IDE that you want to specialize in. So for me, it's PHP Storm. Yes, people look at me whenever I open up PHP Storm, especially if I work with a bunch of front-enders, which I do, because they all use VS Code. I've got nothing against VS Code. I use VS Code. I use it every single day. It is my text editor of choice. I've always got a text editor. That's one thing I've always had on my machine, because you always need some type of text editor to open up where you can just write a bit of markdown in there. But for me, I like PHP Storm. Yes, it can be clunky. It can use up 4 gig of RAM. It can also, create a 16 gig cache folder. And when you upgrade to the new version of PHP Storm, it doesn't delete the older one. So you end up with 40, 50 gig of cache folders, things like that. But it does the job for me. And one thing I absolutely love to bring up, and I've been meaning to do a video about this, is to go through all of the text editors that I have used in the last 15 years.
Notepad++.
Whoa, gedit. Notepad++, what is it? Notepad, Aptana, Eclipse.
Wow.
Eclipse. What is it? Z Studio, Komodo. What is it? Komodo.
Why have you used so many text editors?
NetBeans.
See, I learned Vim in 1996. It might not have been Vim then. It might have been Vi.
I've tried to learn Vim. I've tried it. I've honestly tried it. So whenever people talk about, VS Code, it's the greatest thing ever, it's like, who cares what brand of hammer you are using? No one cares. And also, it's going to change. Isn't there Z now coming out, like a Rust? There's some other, I think it's called Z, or is that something else?
Probably. There's always a new one.
There's always, exactly. And it's like,
by the time you master one, you've got to master another one.
Oh, it's not Z editor. Is it Z or editor?
I've got a vague recollection
Zod.
of hearing
Oh, no,
about
that's right. Z-E-D. Oh, sorry, for our American listeners, Z. But no, we call it Z.
Easy.
But no, but then there's also Zod. No, what is it? Zod is, I think,
Isn't that Superman's dad?
No, that is a TypeScript first schema validation with static typing. Oh, there you go. Oh, that's I just.
But can you say that again?
Oh, I've got no idea.
It sounds like Star Trek.
Yes, exactly.
Schema first.
No.
TypeScript validation.
Okay. TypeScript first. So this is Zod. Is it pronounced Zod? Let me see. Speech to text. Yeah, Zod.dev. TypeScript first schema validation with static type inference.
Static type inference.
So I believe but isn't that what TypeScript is? I don't know. Now I'm literally showing how little I know.
What does it mean by static in that? I'm trying to figure it out. Because
yes,
doesn't static means it's stored and it's not. It's.
Well, let's have a look and see what.
I know when you got like a static property in a class, it just stays the same.
Well, yeah.
For every instance of that class, and when you've got static code analysis, it's just when you don't need to compile the code, you just look over you just analyze the uncompiled code. What's static mean in that?
Well, I'm asking Gemini 1.5 Pro.
Gemini,
yeah, because it's free
I'm
for
tell
now.
ChatGPT that you're cheating on it.
I haven't. Okay, so a library that helps developers build robust and type-safe APIs using TypeScript. That's what I thought TypeScript was to begin with. So now there's a layer on top of TypeScript. There we go.
You thought you knew TypeScript, and now you're like, I don't know TypeScript.
I have to learn everything again. Everything again.
That's the thing I get a lot of the time, that someone will bring out a new technology and you go, what is it? And they go, it's this. And you go, isn't that what that is? No, it's completely different. And you're like, so what's that? And I go, it's this. And what's that? It's this. And you go, same. No, it's completely different. And you're like, I don't know. What's the advantage of this? And it's so you don't have to do that. And you go, I already don't have to do that. What? Like,
I know. It's kind of like the latest version of Next.js now has server-side rendering. Server-side rendering. I remember a couple of years ago saying everything had to be done in the client and the virtual DOM. That's the fastest way of doing it. So now you're telling me that it's actually faster to have the server compile things and compute things. PHP's been doing that.
That's why they invented server-side includes way back in the day in the first place.
Yeah. Python can do that. Every other server application can do that. So now we're just going back in circles. Again, as I've said multiple times in this podcast, we're building the same websites, but the way we build them just keeps getting more and more complex.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's like the same.
Yeah, we're
building the same thing over and over again, but it's just the way we're building it. I don't know if it's just to keep ourselves employed.
I was watching a video the other day, and somebody referred to Web 2.0 as the age of social media. Web 2.0 is all your Twitter and Facebook and things like that. That's Web 2.0.
Ajax.
Yeah, no, and I'm like, no, it's Ajax. I mean, it made the interfaces for those things nice, but Facebook was around. I don't think Facebook was post Ajax, but it didn't use a lot of it. But that's that's to me basically Web 2.0 was that bloody function you used in JavaScript to call it.
Yeah,
Ajax
what is it?
request.
XML?
Right.
Is it XML HTT?
Think so.
Oh, I forgot what that was. Like,
see, you'd never even touch it. It's so abstracted away now.
I do remember writing some bit of code for that. Ajax. XML.
Because jQuery came out.
HTTP request.
That's it. XML HTTP request. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Yeah, and you can still write code like
that.
That to me, that was my understanding of Web 2.0. Was it was basically that function allowed you to call things from the server, stick it into your DOM without refreshing your page. Woohoo!
Yeah.
And then to hear people describe it as Web 2.0 is social networks, Twitter, Facebook, and you're like, see, where did the and there's probably a lot of people who tell me I'm wrong, that is what Web 2.0 means. It's language changes. I find it hard I've always found it hard, of course, when things come out, and I tend to be very literal. So a new technology will come out, I'll go, cool, I'll learn all about it, and in a very short space of time, it's been like Bootstrap, I told you, gets used wrong, and people start using it incorrectly, and they use it differently, and next thing people come to you and they go, do you know Web 2.0? And you go, yes, and they go, do this, and you're like, what is this? It's I don't know what this is.
Yes.
Talking text editors before, not text editors, IDEs, because when I decided not to use PHP Storm, I might just switch to go and have a look at VS Code. I generally know VS Code. I open it up and it's generally the same. You can open a file, it's got code completion.
Yeah.
See, but there's some things that are different. It doesn't do it exactly the same way. And then you go to plug in Xdebug, for example, and you want it to, and it's just a little bit different. And then suddenly I've got to start writing JavaScript configuration files to get Xdebug working, and you're just kind of like, I don't, it's the learning curve's massive then. It's of course, I know how to set up Xdebug in PHP Storm, and then I switch over to this. Why is the paradigm so much different when it's basically the same damn thing?
Yeah.
It's still start and stop, listen, but just the way you configure it, it was a pain. It's like, so you talk about learning VS Code, you go in there expecting to be able to just pick up and it go. So you mentioned before, why does it matter what hammer you use? And I go, of course, one's a hammer and the other's, the hammers are simple. A hammer's a hammer
Yeah.
I bet you a bunch of bloody construction workers are, carpenters.
Oh yeah, I know. All of our, I know we're going to get a lot of letters telling us, no, there are
There are a
differences
lot of
to
different
hammers.
hammers.
There's a lot
But
of hammers.
that's the point. A hammer's not a hammer. But then an IDE, like a ball peen hammer is a ball peen hammer. Like if it's used to do a certain job, use the same hammer to do the same job. You don't really have another thing that does the exact same job in basically the same way, but you got to go to a school again to learn how to use it. That's an IT problem.
Absolutely. But all I'm trying to say is don't be too dogmatic about which editor you're using. Developers are dogmatic about everything these days. It's like no one cares. Your job there is to solve a problem. That's it. And who cares?
The developers love making problems.
Editor you're using. Use whichever one you're comfortable with. I like PHP Storm because I've had issues in the past and I never ever upgrade to the latest version straight away. I always wait for at least a maintenance release. That's coming back to my whole, growing up in, Windows 95, Windows 98, or Windows
back in DOS,
days.
you never got
you didn't get the first version. Always wait for the first maintenance release.
Wait for the bugs to get ironed out first.
Yeah, and that's why even to this day, I'm always one version behind on Mac OS. I'm always one version behind because I've got no
service
need to
releases
upgrade.
of things like Debian and Ubuntu on Linux. Right, the software you install on those are 2 years behind.
Yeah,
right, for the because they're stable and they work.
Yes,
and they're missing all the cool features that the cool kids want to use. Which I probably shouldn't say it that way, but it sucks too, right? Not having access to those bleeding edge things, and that's a challenge with learning these things. When you stay on the bleeding edge all the time, you're dealing with problems all the time. So if you wait around to use the ones that are stable so that there's less problems to solve, so your tools just work so you can solve the problems you're being paid to solve, you're suddenly in this but where people are expecting you to use the latest stuff anyway. And you're like, well, now there's there's other people solving those problems. I think it's kind of, and I mean, that does happen on projects as well, where we're locking down on this version of thing and we're sticking with that because it's stable. But every project, every team's different. Every team's got a different philosophy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, which also means sometimes you don't know the latest stuff. Because I haven't used the latest stuff. The version I'm using is the stable one. It doesn't have those features. I don't know those features, And I've never been one to spend hours and hours and hours studying development outside of work, because I'd finish work, come home and go, there's the plumber's leaky tap thing. Last thing I want to do is, I don't even play computer games, because after sitting on a computer all day, the last thing I want to do is sit there and solve problems in a computer game.
Absolutely.
So
we can go through a few other that are more non-technical things. So a few things that I've chucked into this document is things like project management tools. So Jira, Confluence, as much as people hate them, I for one am happy that there is some standard, because I know 9 times out of 10, if I go into a new place, they will have either Teams or Slack. And that's another one. You want to know how to use those.
What's that open source one that I've seen heaps, probably because of my background? Redmine. Yeah.
There's Redmine. Just standardizing on a ticketing system, because I remember working back in the day where ticketing systems weren't that popular, and they would email a spreadsheet of requirements, and literally we'll go row by row, and there'll be one sentence explaining something, and they're like, it'll be like some arbitrary sentence.
Kanban boards are revolutionary.
Well,
absolutely
just
amazing.
Just having a ticketing system is a good thing. But learning those is a good skill to have, because so many times I've had people, and this was back before, when we used to work in offices, people would watch me make my way through tickets, and I would always learn the keyboard shortcuts in Jira, and straight away they would be like, oh, they go, how do you do that? How do you do that? It's like, well, it's just a keyboard shortcut. But that comes down to just knowing tech and knowing that application. It's like, I know there's a keyboard shortcut. I'll just learn
Look
that.
it up, use it for a day, and then it becomes second
exactly.
nature. Yeah.
You use it for a day. You know how to quickly edit, assign, add story points, and you're done. So project management tools. The other one that's popular nowadays is Figma. You know, so many times I'm given up. Here's a Figma thing. Oh, do you have access to our Figma board? And 9 times out of 10, I'm like, no, I don't want access to it. But they're like, oh yeah, you know, you can find the exact font by clicking here.
Yeah, but when is it ever true?
I know. And then it's like, oh yeah, the Figma designs are out of date. Okay.
Well, this is what I said before about. Did I say this before? See, I find with Figma, you'll get a front end person who's got Figma's amazing, Figma's great. Here, we'll send you the Figma designs, and you open it up, and here's 100 different pages down the side.
Yeah.
With headings 1, headings old, headings new, headings current, bodies 1, bodies 2, bodies 3.5, blah. Empty. Ignore this one. And you open it up, and then you open up a page, and there's 5 different versions of something, and you're just like, I know you said you know Figma, but I feel like knowing how to organize your things in a neat, easy to navigate, find them way counts as knowing Figma, right? And if you don't know how to do that, you don't know how to use Figma. You've just used it to make a mess.
Yeah.
Right. And then when I said I was talking to this before, I'm learning Figma in that environment. That's what I said about Bootstrap. It's like kind of, you get thrown at Figma. It's like, what even is the point of going off and learning how to use Figma properly and reading all these tutorials that teach you the proper approaches to organize things, which they generally are documented and things on these type of things, when the project you're using just didn't do any of that anyway, and it's just made up on the fly, and it's all a big mess. I find that, and they go, do you know Figma? And you go, I log in there, I get lost. You know, like I know how to open up a font. I know how to, but I generally, what do you mean, do I know Figma? It's a website. You point and click. It's got a canvas. It's got pages. It's got designs in the pages. I can right click on them, open up the properties, and look at the details. Yes, I know Figma. You know, but I've never. What do you mean? But if you ask me to build a design in Figma, no idea. And then there's all sorts of other stuff Figma does that I've got no idea about.
Oh yeah, you can add a whole bunch of interactions and things like that, and
yeah. I mean, it's Jira's the same. Big reason I've never liked Jira is it just does too much, and then people use it to build problems. You know, you said it, we're supposed to be solving problems, and most of the problems I've been solving is Jira's not working, or it's not configured, or how do I find this in Jira, or it's like. I'm a big advocate for Trello, and people just, but it doesn't have this feature, and you can't do this, and you can't do this. I'm like, good. Because you don't need those things, and all you're going to do is build a complex system when it should be simple. Like just, you know, you can't do sub tickets, and you know what? But it's agile. Yes, it's agile and Scrum.
You can
be having child tickets. Anyway. Yeah, but it's kind of you know, it gets over engineered too easy. I'm a big whinge. I'm a bit of a that's why I don't like Jira. Because I got very into, because we talk about dogmatic. I learned about agile and Scrum. Got very excited about it when I first came around it, and went and got trained as a Scrum Master and read all the books. And the dogmatic approach to Scrum is you put it on a piece of paper and you stick it on the Kanban board.
Yeah.
And when you got a job, you go up and get it. And they go, what about remote teams? You need something for them. And you go, you come in the morning, you take a photo of it, you send it to the other team, and you get them to replicate it on their board. So they got a piece of paper too. And every day you update and that's how you do a remote team. We're going to use Jira and configure all these things and do all this stuff. And it's amazing. We're agile because we've got Jira. And in my opinion, if you're using Jira, you're not agile. Like and that's my take on it. Just because it does too much. The whole point of it, from my understanding, keep it simple, right? Piece of paper. That's the whole. It's tangible. It's in your hands. Is you take it off the board, you stick it on your screen. You go, that's what I'm working on here now. And when you finish, you put it in testing box. And then the next person comes up, picks up that piece of paper and has it in their hand. There's a element of the tangibility and ownership because it's real. And, you know, and that's where I get some of it. And I question sometimes a lot of the technology we use. Like you said before, that now we're writing server-side stuff in React. And it's like we've gone full. So I don't know React well enough and I don't know everything well enough, but I feel like you've just reinvented the wheel and you're just doing it the way we did it in the first place. And we should just go back and just go back, drop all this stuff. But no one wants to because they're so invested in this new
back
tech.
to PHP.
But if we went back and rebuild it again, I mean, we're still using PHP. Drupal's still getting by. Some people are plugging React into Drupal, but you can use XML HTTP request and do Ajax in Drupal and build very similar things. You don't get the speed of the what I call it, the not a pseudo DOM. Doesn't React have a copy of the DOM of its own kind of thing?
Well, I have no idea, but there are systems out there that I think like Laravel is huge. Like when it comes to PHP.
So Laravel's something I don't know. I wish I did because, again, Drupal picked up Symfony. Great, cool, Symfony. I'm going to go with Symfony because Drupal picked it up. Must be the one to learn Symfony. Yeah. And then suddenly Laravel takes over and I lost the beta VHS war again.
Well, technically, Laravel uses Symfony components. So it's the components that Drupal's using as well. Right. Yes.
And so whether I could argue I use Symfony or not is
that's it. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay.
God, we've covered a lot of things. God, if somebody wants to be a web developer and they're listening to this, hey.
Oh, haven't you seen that what is it, flow chart of becoming a front-end developer, back-end developer, what you need to learn? There's actually a funny one out there. I'll send it to you.
But no one knows all of this. Nobody. That's a big message of nobody. Anybody who knows all of this is working for a company getting paid so much money, right? Anybody who knows all of this and can do it out of their back is working for SpaceX, right? They're nobody.
No. I know, absolutely.
And that comes back to the full stack developer. Are you a full stack developer? I'm just like, well, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think technically I'm totally there's no reason I can't call myself a full stack developer. The fact I've been able to be here and have this conversation, I think proves that. But then I'm kind of like, I don't know any bloody thing. So we did discuss about the non-IDEs and Jira and
I think
stuff
we've covered
like that.
Everything.
Cool. We didn't cover the Agile stuff. We can do that some other time.
Oh, we covered Agile enough.
Yeah, we talked about it. It. My T-shirt's too big.
Yes.
Anyway, inside Agile joke. I hope you get it.
Yes.
And all right. So, do you want to wrap this up?
Absolutely. I think.
All right.
Yeah, I think one of the little top tip or nugget of wisdom you can get from all of this is that there's a lot more to development than just writing code. There's a lot more, and you just need to be on top of it and hopefully you work in a place where they can teach you these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you just need to know enough, I think, is also you just need to know enough. I mean, everybody's faking it to a large extent. Like that's that T-shaped thing. We've all got our speciality, and outside that, I mean, I guess it's my skill set. That's what kept me going. I can figure it out on the fly. It just gets hard when you're under the pressure and they're like, tell us the answer now. And you're like,
Yes. Or
the old sales technique. I don't know the answer to that, but I can go and find out for you. Is classic one, and I recommend sticking to that. A lot of the time, that's the answer. Look, I don't know, and that's why in Scrum Agile I push for spikes a lot. I need to do a spike because I need to.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
And,
That's a smart way.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Okay. All right.
Wrap it there.
Thank you very much.
All right. See you all later.
See ya. Bye.
Bye-bye.